What's wrong with eating fish, assuming it came from healthy waters?
You know, it's an interesting question, and if you look around the world at some of the healthiest people, the Okinawans ate fish, the Sardinians, the people in Ikaria, a lot of healthy people do include fish, and so then why wouldn't we want to eat it when there are some of the healthiest people in the world? A couple of things that people need to be aware of. For example, the Okinawans averaged a half an ounce of fish a day. That's about 15 grams for people who are on the metric scale. And so this is a very tiny amount of fish. It's not a lot. They might have eaten it twice a week in very small servings. And so I think people can be healthy eating small amounts of clean fish. The issues for me are several. Number one, that fish is only as clean as the water it's swimming in. And our oceans are becoming more and more contaminated. Fish is one of our main dietary sources. It is the main dietary source of mercury, and it's one of the main sources of persistent organic pollutants in our environment. Dioxins and PCBs and all of these things that we know are neurotoxins. And so that's an issue for sure. And then the other issue is we are raping the oceans. There were a group of scientists that predicted by 2048 there wouldn't be any fish stocks left to fish. It would all be fish farming because we are cleaning out the oceans. I remember a program about life in the ocean. The last 5 minutes of the program showed one of these huge nets that are dragged along the bottom of the ocean. Everything in the net brought back up to the surface, and they picked off the prawns. About 20% of the weight of what was there was prawns. The other 80% fell, they let die, and turtles and sharks and you name it, dead back to the bottom of the ocean. It's of no value to the shrimp industry. So we also need to think about how these fish are being caught and what we're doing in the process to our ocean ecosystems, which to me is a big issue. And then for people who are interested in the compassion piece, fish, we used to think they didn't feel or think or any of that stuff, and that's just not true. There's a man by the name of Jonathan Balcombe that is a researcher in this area, and he's written several books, and we are learning a lot about the sort of sensibilities, if you will, of these creatures that are living in the ocean, and I think that needs to be weighed in as well. So my personal preference is not to consume fish.
According to the best unbiased science, is there a clear relation between consuming eggs and heart disease, cancer, and diabetes?
Well, with eggs, there's actually a fair bit of evidence on both sides. I think a fair bit of the evidence on the favorable side that they're healthy comes from the egg industry, which isn't surprising. Some not so much, but I think the studies are fairly clear that that eggs do increase certainly diabetes risk, and that they can increase blood cholesterol levels because they're little cholesterol bombs. Now we know cholesterol from food doesn't impact blood cholesterol levels as much as we once thought, but it still does increase it to some degree. And so I think we need to be aware of that. And so, of course, if it's increasing blood cholesterol levels, it can be a contributing factor to cardiovascular disease. Now, there was an interesting study that came out, I think it was 2018, but this was a Harvard study, 130,000 individuals followed for about 3 decades. So this is a big cohort followed for a long period of time. And what these researchers looked at was if we replace just 3% of calories coming from animal protein and replace it with plant protein, what will that mean for mortality rates? And just to set the stage here, 60, or to give you some framework that's more practical, 3% of calories in a 2,000 calorie diet, which is kind of standard for a lot of people, would be about 60 calories worth of animal protein. This is not a lot. If we take 3% of calories from animal protein, replace it with plant protein, what happens in terms of mortality? Well, if that animal protein comes from processed meat, we decrease mortality 34% if that processed meat is replaced with plant protein. That's a lot. If we take the animal protein and it's coming from eggs and replace it with plant protein, we reduce mortality by 19%. That's significant. So if it's unprocessed meat, it's 12%. If it's dairy, it's 8%. And if it's poultry or fish, it's 6%. So I think this is a pretty significant finding. Of all of the animal products that were assessed in that study, eggs came out number 2 right after processed meat in terms of how much mortality is increased by replacing that food with plant protein. I will pick scrambled tofu over scrambled eggs any day.